An important job for Mike. One evening, Mike was puffing home, tender thirst. He was feeling very tired. He had done a lot of hard work, and it was beginning to make him feel very tired. When he got back, he saw Gordon. When he got back, he found Gordon alone in the sheds. With that, Mike was on the turntable, and he clanked slowly into his shed. "Hello, Mike," said Gordon. "You're looking very tired." "Of course I am," said Mike. "I've been working hard all day without even resting." "So have I," said Gordon. "But don't worry," he said. "Things will get better tomorrow." "Yeah, I hope so," said Mike. "Anyways," he said, "I worked so hard, pulling goods and passengers." I've still been pulling the express," said Gordon, "and it made me feel very exhausted." "Well," said Mike, I hope everything will be better tomorrow." "Agreed," said Gordon. With that, the two shut their eyes and went to sleep. They were still sleeping when the Fat Controller arrived. Mike began to open his eyes. "What's the Fat Controller doing here?" he thought. "I wonder what he wants from us this time." The Fat Controller had important news. He turned to Mike, who was feeling very worried. Okay, he said. I have to tell you this right now," he said. Mike, I have some news for you. Poor Duke had to be sent to the works to be mended last night because he came off the rails by the troublesome trucks going on, this and that. So this time I want you to be doing Duke's work. But Mike was surprised and felt in shock. He felt very upset. "Oh man," he said, "this is ridiculous," he said. "Why can't James or Henry do it? And what about my express?" "I'm afraid," said the Fat Controller, "I'm bringing Stafford back to pull your coaches. So instead, you'll have to do Duke's work." "But," said Mike. "You will do as you're told," said the Fat Controller, and he walked away. Mike knows that really useful engines don't argue. With that, he went to sleep feeling very upset. It became morning time, and Mike was on his way to see the Fat Controller. But really, the Fat Controller was busy, so Mike had to do everything on his own. He plugged into the main line, and he went to the station, where he saw Stafford again. Mike was not impressed. "Well, hello there," said Stafford. You seem to be in different shape." "I've changed," said Mike. "And really," he said, "what were you doing here?" "Oh," boasted Stafford, "I came here because show-offs like you think you're all so special." Mike felt very cross. "The last time you were here," he said, "you tried to replace Paxton, didn't you?" he said. "What would I need from Paxton?" said Stafford. He's just an annoying fool," he said. "Whereas if I am the best," he said. Mike frowned at Stafford. He did not like Stafford coming back, and with that, he was feeling very annoyed with Stafford. Just then, the Fat Controller had finally arrived. "Mike," he said, "the time has come for you to do Duke's work, and the time has come for Stafford to pull your passengers." Yes, sir," grunted Mike, and Mike puffed away. And Stafford was preparing to get Mike's coaches. Just then, Stafford had just finally got Mike's coaches. The passengers were on board, and the guard blew his whistle, and Stafford was ready to go. Stafford began to go faster and faster. He showed the new passengers Many of the sights of Sodor as the passengers were enjoying themselves very well. Stafford began even liking his journey, but really it began to make him feel really useful. But Stafford somehow, when he found everything about himself really interested, it made him want to feel better than the other engines. When he arrived at the station, the passengers were very impressed with Stafford. Stafford was impressed and felt very glamorous that he was not able to see Paxton again, or Mike. In the meantime, Mike had already arrived at the yards, where he saw Kanan waiting for him. "Hello there, Mike," he said. "Are you ready to do some shunting?" Well, yeah, said Mike. "I'm ready for some more shunting since I've not pulled trucks in a while," he grumbled. Stafford felt sorry for Mike. I see this Stafford engine is troubling you," he said. "Yes," said Mike. "I can't even get him out the railway anymore. He even tried to replace Paxton when Paxton used to be new here," he said. "I see," said Kanan. "Well, thanks for telling me that, Mike," he said. But he sometimes thinks he's better than us," he said. "Yeah, whatever," said Mike. And then Mike was ready to do his shunting. When he approached the siding, the trucks made fun of Mike. "Oh, look who's got a new job now," said the truck in front. The two from behind all laughed at Mike. Mike was very cross. "That's it," said Mike. "Let me at him." Whoa, said Kanan. He stopped Mike to bump the trucks, but Mike had already stopped. "Just ignore them," said Kanan. Just ignore them, and then they'll get bored of it." "I guess it might work," said Mike. "It might do," said Kanan, and Kanan puffed away. And that made Mike feel very better. But in the very meantime, the trucks had still been very silly to Mike. They were all trying to make Mike feel upset, but Mike wanted to bump the trucks, but it was hard not to. With that, Mike took Kanan's advice and ignored the trucks. Mike was not enjoying his life with the trucks. The trucks began to feel very silly with Mike, and they were all getting very cheeky with him. They even approached the hill, and Mike struggled as hard as he could, but Mike was a very strong engine as he pulled the trucks so hard. The trucks all made fun of Mike, but Mike, whilst ignoring the trucks, was starting to get upset. He couldn't take their jokes anymore, and still poor Mike was starting to get bullied. When sunset began, Mike clanked silently into the sheds. He was not having a very good day. He wished he would go back and pull his own coaches again, but Stafford took over, and Mike was still not happy about it. He went sadly. "I'll never even go back to my own coaches again," he said. "All I'm going to do is end up with them trucks teasing me forever," he said sadly. With that, he crawled sadly into his shed and went to sleep. But it had already gone dark by the time Mike closed his eyes. He could hear the sound of an engine chucking and an engine's loud whistle. Mike woke up. Coming towards him was a small tender, and it had this similar colour. And it had the similar colour he thought he'd recognise. "It's Duke," he said. "Duke's back," he said. At last, Mike had seen the truth. "Oh, finally," said Duke. "Oh, finally," said Mike. Now that Duke's back, I hope the Fat Controller gets rid of Stafford for good." At last, Duke crawled in next to Mike. "Hi, Mike," said Duke. I've heard you were doing my work lately. Yeah, I was, said Mike. I'm glad to have you back. Yeah, said Duke. I'm glad you're okay. Yeah, buddy, said Mike. I've really missed you. Oh, I've missed you too, said Duke. And I've heard rumours that stupid show-off Stafford has come back. Yeah, said Mike. Now that you're back, the Fat Controller will bring him back to where he belongs. But Mike was hoping, but really he haven't even found out yet. The next morning, Mike was excited to tell the Fat Controller about Duke coming back. When all of a sudden he saw Stafford again. Mike was still in shock when he saw Stafford again. Stafford, he said, what are you doing here? I thought that if Duke left, you'd leave this railway and go back to where you came from. Oh, that, said Stafford. Well, anyways, he said, the other railway was no good to me, so instead the Fat Controller suggested that I could stay here every year. What a contrary, he said. Mike felt very disgusted. He was annoyed with Stafford and the fact that he was on the Fat Controller's railway again. Just then, Duke arrived. He was not impressed too, but before they were on to their arguing, the Fat Controller went to see them. Stafford, he said, you'll be taking the new passengers to drop off to the other station. You can make up time afterwards. Sure, sir, said Stafford. I take them everywhere now, even to the big station. That's far away over Boulder Mountain, said Duke. You'll need to take on plenty of water, said Mike, but Stafford frowned at Mike. I'm an electric engine. I don't run on water. I have a battery, he said. So I'll be fine, thank you very much, he said. But Mike was trying to advise Stafford, but Stafford ignored Mike and raced away. When Stafford arrived at the station, the passengers were on board, and Stafford was ready to leave. He sped along the line, feeling very proud of himself as he steamed faster and faster. The coaches began singing as Stafford was racing along. He even didn't care that he was running out of charge, and then, by the time he reached the bridge, Stafford began to stop. Oh, flip, he cried. I've not listened, he said, and that made him feel very silly. And his driver and fireman telephoned for help. At last Mike came to the rescue, but he was still reversing tender first. Ran out of charge, have we not? Said Mike. Oh, just shut up and carry on, said Stafford crossly. If you say so, said Mike. With that, Mike was ready and was coupled up. And at last, he pulled Stafford and was ready to take him to the station. And at last, however, when they reached downhill, they went through a tunnel and into the station they went. And at last, all of the passengers were at the station, and they all clapped for Mike. The other engines all made fun of Stafford. What was that he said a long time ago, said Duke. He thought he was better than us, but he's not now, said Rheneas. The engines all laughed at Stafford, but this made Stafford feel very silly. At last, the Fat Controller came to congratulate Mike. Well done, Mike, he said. I'd like to, thank you for saving our passengers today, he said. He turned crossly to Stafford, and Stafford, he said, you have been very boastful and rude to Mike ever since I brought you back here. But I've got some good news for you, and some bad news. The bad news is, Kanan has broken down, and the good news is, you'll be doing his job for the rest of the day. Stafford felt very cross. That's not fair, he said. Well, I bet it isn't, said the Fat Controller, and that's why you're in very big trouble, he said. That made Stafford feel very silly, and he was feeling very embarrassed indeed.